It's not to say the court would have anything to say about it, because they were fed a good monetary bribe to make sure that these new ill standards and wrongdoings are still going on with the status quo. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. Welcome to you first to the show. Think about it. Whenever we shoot the show and whenever we bring information to you, obviously we do the best of research that we can to bring forward something that's authentic to you and to bring forward something that's more logical and something that would ultimately be able to help you think about it. Today's show, I want to start with a story, as we always do. This story is of a king. This king is known to be a great person, loved by his people, and has helped his kingdom prosper, maybe slowly, but definitely. Has done things that has helped his people quite a lot, whether it be regarding welfare, whether it be regarding generation for people to eat and drink, a system where honor is something that goes to the highest esteem. Now, this king one day leaves out and wants to visit the people of his kingdom. And he goes to different shops and stores and areas just to say hi and hello to all the people within his vicinity and jurisdiction. Now, as he is doing this, a person who has a food cart is really excited to see the king. He takes a bag and he puts in some fruit, and he goes to the king and he presents it to the king saying that this is for you, sire. And the king looks at him and says, how much do I owe you? And so this person says, no, king, you are our leader. This is a gift for you. And so the king looks at him and says, allow me to speak to you. Basically what this means is that the king is surrounded by an entourage of people, security guards and whatever the case is. And allow me to speak to you means, can I talk to you in private? And so this person's like, of course. The king takes him to the side. And the king says to him that if I take this from you for free right now, you see these people behind me? They're going to empty out this village if they see the king taking something for free. If they see the king taking something and taking advantage of his position. These people will start taking advantage of theirs. So my good man, I ask you once again, how much do I owe you? This story has a very important moral that needs to be extracted. And that moral is leadership, whether it be monarchy, as this king's example, or whether it be democracy. At the end of the day, leadership revolves around responsibility and accountability. We've done shows before where we've talked about what a leader is. Leadership is not a rank. We've said this many times before. To be a CEO of a company, it might sound good in the modern 21st century. However, being a CEO is not about having that rank. It's about the responsibility that comes with it. Now, some people understand that and some people don't. Some people look at leadership as a rank. They look at towards and as a status symbol. I'm a business owner, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. Every gathering you go to where people are of a materialistic nature, they try to one-up each other. That means they try to win arguments or show that they're really accomplished or that they have some form of status in society. Dear viewers, with that, I'm going to be talking about a topic today that a lot of people told me to speak on. And some people told me not to, because I usually don't get that political. However, politics is a part of life. What is politics? What is democracy? What is autocracy? What is dictatorship? What are all these things? The past few weeks of my life, as just an observer, as a journalist, as someone who has access to information, at the same time, I have access to the common information that everybody else does as well. Sometimes that common information gives you more than the access information that we have. So I'd like to start off this show by a small analysis that I have written. Forgive me, I'm going to be reading a little bit, but hopefully I get the message across. Dear viewers, in a world where religion, etiquette, ethics, rights, and systemic politics are the biggest issues, they are the major issues, make no mistake. Every gathering you go to, people talk about politics, people talk about their rights, people talk about issues within their families, people talk about religion being an issue, people talk about discrimination, etc., etc., etc. In such a world, when you take a look at young people who are growing up, we're told that we're supposed to look for justice within the system. And so when we grow up, you have all these grown-up people, adults who are skilled in different types of professions, whether it be doctors, engineers, lawyers, journalists, teachers, drivers, truckers, in construction, you name it, whatever field they may have. Everyone believes and has a hope in something called justice and something called a system. So we're told that we're supposed to have and we're supposed to want justice and fairness, which is absolutely fine. In fact, it's great. In fact, that's how it should be. These values that we've been told to have and that we've been told will somehow help us, you and I, prosper in this world are nothing short of hypocrisy in the 21st century. And when I say this with absolute analysis, and I say this with absolute research, and I put this in front of you. Is it not true that somewhere along the equator, there's a teacher who's in a class who's telling his or her students how students should and need to behave towards a teacher, how they should emulate respect when they talk to a teacher, how there should be izzah. Izzah is another word for respect. How there should be a little bit of respect and your tonality should change when you're talking to a teacher. And a teacher is someone who you're supposed to listen to as well and take directive from. Now, when teachers say this, is it also not true that that very teacher only needs an excuse to break every principle that he or she is preaching when they get an excuse against a student? The moment a student does something wrong, they will not hold back in ridiculing that student. I'm not saying this is for all teachers, but this is for quite a few. Statistics show above 50%, which is too much already. 0% is too much. Above 50 is astonishing. So that would basically mean that people are preaching an idea, yet they themselves don't implement it in their lives. With that, is it also not true that in homes, somewhere in some homes, you have parents who are telling their children to not only have patience, but always be truthful. Don't lie. Be truthful, son. Be truthful, my dear. Be truthful, my daughter. Don't lie. And we're told that when we lie, it's a huge sin, which it is. However, a phone call will come to the dad's phone, all right? Son or daughter will pick up the phone and will answer it. Someone will say, hey, is your dad there? Is your mom there? And then they would turn down and they look at their dad and their mom and say, oh, the phone, somebody's asking for you. And the same parents will say, tell them I'm sleeping. Tell them I'm busy. You've already taught your children that the very lesson you're trying to get across means nothing to you. With such a situation and with such a time, we've talked about technology, we've talked about all this other stuff. We use these excuses of technology, of different times, of impatience, of environment and all these things, and we blame the younger generation, whether they be the millennials, whether they be Gen Zs. We blame them for not knowing what an honest day's work looks like. We blame them for not putting that much effort into things, or being hardworking enough. We blame them for things and we compare them to previous generations. However, the audacity of doing so, when the very people who are complaining, who are blaming, who are comparing, are looking for shortcuts are looking for ways where they very much show evident that they themselves are impatient. Combine all this and compound it with the lack of morals that we have and the lack of religious values. And you get the 21st century where people are apparently more educated than they ever were before. My analysis? Intelligent? Quick-wit? Yes. Educated? No. It's alarming enough to know that the elite of this world, who have money, who have the standards that people can't necessarily meet at times, what they're doing is they're busy in their lives trying to uphold that standard and appearance. They're busy in their lives bragging to that circle of people who only brag about things. They're so busy in the materialistic gain that itself is a task. It's not easy to keep up appearances. It's not easy to keep showing people that you're rich. It's not easy to keep showing people that you have something to offer. It itself is an arduous task with no benefit, except maybe somebody who's amongst the same group who will come around and pat you in the back, and that same person who's patting you in the back is already selling themselves short and ruining their own self-worth because they're running after materialistic gains, shopping in Paris and then in France and then in London and doing this and then doing that. What's the point? When at the same time, these people who control I don't know how much % of the wealth of this world, there's a chasm big enough that it covers the earth's layers up until the very core of people, an overpopulous amount of people who are below the poverty line, who cannot get necessities. This is the world we live in, dear viewers, where everything is just muddled up and mixed up. Yet here we are, ousting leaders who don't have a single case of corruption to their name, only to be blamed for trying to make a welfare state so that every individual may access things of basic necessities. We're blaming this person who's trying to indulge himself in an endless effort of undoing over 70 years of complexities that have led to a society having traditions which are ill and traditions which promote wrongdoing, promote shortcuts, and promote self-interest. And now you and I sit in gallery as though we're in a theater, sitting up and looking down at the show, or looking up, depending on what your position is. And we're observing a replacement that was said to be put behind bars the day of his admission to becoming the premier of a country. For those viewers who've been following me and who understand it very well, for those who don't, let me break it down for you. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, was removed, ousted. Not because he was corrupt, not because he had not done or unchained things or didn't live up to his promises. Of course, you can't technically tell someone that they haven't lived up to their promises until they've actually had complete time to fulfill a task. If I tell someone that you have 12 hours to fix my house and I have a leaking issue and I need plumbing involved, when the second hour begins and I start complaining that you promised that you would fix that pipe and you promised that you would do this and you promised you would do that, but you're doing none of that, the plumber's going to look at me and say, you gave me 12 hours to do so. Allow me to fulfill my time. And once I'm done, you can bring forward any complaints of anything that I have missed. Imran Khan was ousted before his term as Prime Minister would come to an end. He was replaced by somebody named Awaz Sharif, the very person who on the 11th of April 2021, him and his son were supposed to be behind bars. This person who has replaced him is a person who is the only Prime Minister in the history of Pakistan. I'm not sure if it's in the history of the entire world. I didn't do research to that extent. with the only prime minister in the history of Pakistan to be out on bail by court. It's not to say the court would have anything to say about it, because they were fed a good monetary bribe to make sure that these new ill standards and wrongdoings are still going on with the status quo. With that, before I go any further, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. Think about it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the show, Think About It. We left off talking about leadership, democracy, politics. Now, it's easy to say that these people have sold their souls to the West for monetary gains, and they don't have any form of value, especially religious value. We're in the holy month of Ramadan, subhanAllah, and this is what's happening. People who don't believe in the hereafter believe that this dunya, this world, is everything for them. So they do anything they can to scrape and stay. Imran Khan is the only prime minister who didn't mind being ousted from office. He just wants to know whether there's a good alternative in front of him. Now, as an analyst, bringing this forward to you doesn't in any way or form mean that I have empathy or a side when it comes to politics. But after everything that I've seen, I might as well have a side. I might as well choose logic over stupidity. I might as well choose someone who is not corrupt over people who have a history and a norm of making sure that not only are they corrupt, but the entire world knows that they're corrupt. And that every single time they do anything, it defiles a country's image. It defames them. Now, with all these facts staring us right bluntly in the face, it's still not enough for pseudo-intellectuals. Rather, I would say ill-informed and bigots. Because they still feel the need to complain against the person who's been ousted, as though they have a right to do so, as though doing so is gonna, get them a few claps and whatever the case is in a gathering of people who are skilled trade professionals. Which brings me back to a point that I've mentioned in other shows before. We sit down in gatherings and we go to homes where you have people who are doctors, engineers, dentists, teachers, lawyers, professors, you name it, all walks of life and all types of people are there. People whose skills run industry, and industry runs a community, and communities run a country. So instead of them sharing things that they could related to their field, related to their profession that would actually benefit society, they feel the need to pass judgment on something they know not of. They feel the need to pass judgment on somebody who has been ousted just because they want to be in good books with somebody. I have no idea. And when you hear them rant and complain about somebody who's just been ousted, who hasn't had a single iota or let's say even a scratch of a blame of corruption on them, the natural question, a logical and a neutral question would be, look, if you feel this way about this situation, why didn't you opt for a career in politics, in civil affairs, in foreign affairs, in community work, so that you could have done things that met that standard that you say this person did not achieve? However, saying this won't be taken well either. In fact, saying this and asking this question will be met by further criticism by the person who asks this question. Because these people who have all these complaints and they think that when they complain they do something and some shabashi is going to come their way, people are going to come and pat them on the back as though the Queen of England or a monarch is going to come and knight them. I dub thee, Sir God knows what. These same people can't dish in what they so easily dish out. Regardless of how genuine a critique might be of someone, people might have genuine critiques against Imran Khan. Go ahead, have them. You might have genuine critiques. But having genuine critiques and criticism, education would still not allow you, when we say educated people, education would still not allow you to let what's happening right now go on as though it's nothing. Education would not permit people, even if they have genuine, valid, authentic complaints against someone, to allow corrupt people to come forth, to allow courts and establishments and God knows what type of ridiculous plans that come forward to get together to oust someone who is actually an honorable person. a person who hasn't lied at least. You see, a lot of people come up and say that Imran Khan has no knowledge of politics, he doesn't know what's happening, he doesn't know this, he doesn't know that, he doesn't know right from left and left from right. Let's say I agree with you. I myself am in the profession of teaching, journalism, and being an education consultant. These are my three professions, main three professions. As a teacher and professor, I have been teaching for onwards, north of 10 years now. If I were to change my job from one university to another, do you think I would know everything about that university, about their marking scheme, about how their mark sheets are dealt with, about how and what approaches they adopt to when it comes to teaching methodology, of what type of chairs they have? And when I say chairs, I mean the meetings that take place, the minutes of the meetings that go around. What type of advice do they want from different people? You come to Canada, they talk about AOL, AFL, AAL, which is assessment of learning, assessment for learning, assessment as learning. For people who are in Canada, it's not a difficult concept, but for people who are in the Middle East or the subcontinent or somewhere in Europe, maybe it's a new thing. Even if you're an educator and you move from one occupation or one job to another job in the same occupation, it takes you time to understand things and you make mistakes. So Imran Khan, a person who has studied politics, a person who knows how to run a country, a person who stands in front of you and makes a case that I am a person who could do you justice amongst the choices that you have. When he is put into office, he's bound to make mistakes. Everybody is. And the same people these bigots are with right now, Shehbaz Sharif and the entire Tola, all those people. Are you telling me that these people have not made any mistakes? Because if you are, Allah yanik, which means God help you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you hidayah and me hidayah as well. Because then we just live in a broken down system and our world is just further deteriorating. Have a little bit of dhamir, have a little bit of zamir. Think about the hereafter. Sometimes people forget that they're going to die. Kullu nafsin zaiqatul maut. Every soul will taste death. And then you'll be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember that. People forget that they're going to die and then they're making this world everything for themselves. With that, I have to say that education would not allow for people to go along with blatant lies and corruption, even if justified complaints exist against an entity that is not corrupt, Imran Khan. They would not go with the other people. Remember, 13 parties got together to take this man out, to oust him. And not just 13 parties within a country, but a foreign conspiracy as well. Funding as well. $200 million is the last that I researched. And it's still not a fixed figure. People say it could be north of $200 million. This is how much it took these people who've had corruption cases to oust Imran Khan. Now here's the question, why did they oust Imran Khan? Why would you do that? Especially if a presenter is standing and telling you he doesn't have a single corruption case against him. It's because everybody else does. It's because everybody else would be exposed. Something called NAB was created. The National Accountability Bureau, NAB, NAB was created. EVMs, electronic voting machines, were created so clean elections would happen. International voters, overseas Pakistanis, would be allowed to vote in the next upcoming election. Online platforms would be created where you would use your NICOP, your national identity card of overseas Pakistanis, to actually get into it. All these different things were being made. Imran Khan had over 37 different things that he brought to the country that was moving it towards prosperity. Not to mention that he himself as a personality is a leader because he knows about accountability. I'm not saying a rank, accountability. He knows how to project. He knows how to talk. He knows how to understand his people. And when these 13 parties and foreign elements got together to oust him, who got out on the streets? If you open up TikTok and all these different things and you take a look at what people are saying, there are mountainous examples. I'll give you one of a young man who comes from thousands of kilometers away to the national capital where everybody is protesting. And media comes to him and asks him, what brings you here? And he looks at him and he says, there are a lot of reasons, but let me tell you one thing. I want you to go and get the Guinness World Book of Records people. I want you to go get people who could write things down and tell them The 13 parties, or I don't know how many parties, got together to oust one leader. And for that leader's defense, the people of the nation came out onto the streets. With that, there's a lot else that I could talk about. There's a lot else that I could bring in front of you and bring forth. The Insaf Sehat card that came out. Imran Khan was moving Pakistan towards becoming a welfare state, like Canada, where you would have universal health care somewhere down the line. Nobody enters the army as a colonel. You enter as a second lieutenant or the cadet position and you make your way. You can make it fast, but there's still a mountain, a bridge, a ladder that you need to climb. With all that said and done, these new people who've just come into office, who've ousted Imran Khan, have not been elected by the people, by the way. It's between their parties and their National Assembly seats. People who sat down on the House of Commons in Pakistan, equivalent to the Canadian system. And what have they done? The first things that they've done is they're taking away EVMs, electronic voting machines, which basically send you an indirect message that clean elections is something that they don't want. Number two, they're taking away the rights for overseas Pakistanis to vote. Number three, there was something called the Roshan digital account, which was an account built where overseas Pakistanis used to put their money in that would help the development of Pakistan, like remittances that people send forward. Since this new imported, I must say, out of all the research that I've done, this new imported entity that has come, and that's not a valid excuse for a government, it's a sorry excuse for a government, has come. Overseas Pakistanis have started withdrawing their amounts and withdrawing their money from the Roshan digital account, because here's the statement that came out from one of the representatives of overseas Pakistanis in different countries. I'm going to name one. He said that at least taking the money out now, when the money was in there before, we knew that it was with an honest man and an honest leader. If we don't take our money out right now, our hard-earned money, our taxes and everything will end up in corrupt people's accounts, and they will end up making more properties and buying things in foreign lands and foreign places. That is the magnitude of how people feel. With that, I'm trying to be absolutely professional here to bring you a neutral perspective. But let's face it, there isn't a neutral perspective. There isn't one where I could say shabash to Shehbaz Sharif. I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. A person who would sit down in front of you and tell you that, hey, I'm stupid, vote for me. Would you vote for him? It doesn't work that way. A person who says beggars can't be choosers. A person whose own cabinet says that we're on ventilators by the West and by American Pacific, in the specific. At the same time, you have a leader who was in office, acting, who had brought Pakistan's reputation to a high level, Imran Khan, who had told the West and had told the people that you cannot dictate to us. We will move forward doing what we feel is in the best interest of our country and our growth. And it was visibly seen as well. People say, oh, but the expenses rose. Oh, everything became so expensive. It became this. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Verily, after hardship comes ease. This is within the Quran. You cannot undo 70 plus years of bad decisions, wrong turns, pathetic cultures being created in the political system, dynasties being created of political God knows what. Do you actually think Bilal al-Zardari is a Bhutto? No, he's not. First off, let's cancel that out. All right? Get that out of your mind. All right? Secondly, do you actually think that these people are fit to run a country when they themselves blatantly and bluntly tell the world that they are worthless? And you have one person who's standing and trying to fight for your freedom. Just like in 1947, Pakistan got its freedom, 2022, Pakistan is fighting for its freedom. Whose side are you on? I leave that for you to decide, of course. Even if you're on the opposition side, I'm not going to say I hate you. I'm not going to get into an argument with you. I'm just going to say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you and I hidayah. For me, it's about the prosperity of Pakistan. But let's not make a mistake. It's not a situation where I can be neutral. So yes, I am with PTI. Yes, I am with Imran Khan. Yes, I am with Pakistan. Important government, na manzoor. Think about it. Take care. Inshallah, see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.